Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Throwing in the Towel. Each week I dive deep into the NFL season and make the tough call on which team it's time to give up on. Whether it's due to a string of injuries, a losing streak, or just plain bad luck, some teams just don't have what it takes to make it to the postseason. And in this week 9 episode, I'll be throwing in the towel on team number 9, so make sure you stay tuned until the end to see which team that is. And also don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more weekly NFL insights. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get into this episode, and we start with the AFC East, which has a lone representative this week, that being the Miami Dolphins. And Sunday looked like a desperation game for the Dolphins. They fell short once again. Miami is going to have a hard time rebounding, sitting at 2-6, and there are some serious concerns about the direction of this franchise going forward. The Dolphins have invested a ton into building an elite offense around Tua Tagovailoa, but that just hasn't been enough this season. The defense has blown chances to win in back-to-back games, and avoidable mistakes have been part of the problem. Miami's identity is supposed to be a team that scores fast and scores too often for opponents to keep pace. It might be time for the Dolphins to find something else on which they can hang their hat on or create an identity around. And then we go to the AFC North, which has no representatives this week. The towel was thrown in on the Browns, and despite an impressive win over the Ravens, they fell flat against the Chargers, very flat. The Bengals got a win, the Ravens got a win, and the Steelers were on a bye. AFC South has the Texans and the Colts this week, and for the Colts, their listless performance against the Vikings clearly demonstrated that Joe Flacco isn't the answer at quarterback. I think we all knew that, but I think most of us kind of knew that. But the Colts are essentially damned if they do and damned if they don't at this point. Start Anthony Richardson, and the bad habits that led to some of his struggles could become so ingrained in him that it'll be hard for him to turn his career around, and also might just lead to him getting benched again, which you certainly don't want to do that. You don't want to keep flip-flopping. But if you continue to start Joe Flacco, well, then the Colts just continue to be a low-ceiling also-ran that will win just enough games to get buried in the middle round of next year's draft. I don't think they'll win enough to make the postseason. I don't see it happening. Expect a few more weeks of mediocrity with Flacco, followed by the team probably turning back to Richardson to close out the season. And for the Texans, there's some optimism that Nico Collins will return in Week 10, and hopefully he does, because this offense needs him. And part of the reason why they need him is because Stroud looked rather lost on Thursday night against the Jets. If Tank Dell wasn't open, Stroud simply just didn't know what to do. He was either holding the ball too long or forcing throws. It's the second bad game in 3 weeks for Stroud, and there are legitimate doubts about Houston's viability as a Super Bowl contender in the AFC. So they came into the season with a lot of hype, but then injuries kind of struck and the pass protection started breaking down in a negative way. And also the defense hasn't really quite been playing very well recently either too. So the Texans are still the favorite to win the division. They probably aren't going to get very far in the postseason as it looks right now. And lastly, we go to the AFC West, which has a lone representative in the Denver Broncos, who, despite losing to the Ravens, still hold a spot in the postseason, and they would have that spot if the season ended today. But the Broncos have made strides in their second season under Sean Payton. They showed improvement with rookie quarterback Bo Nix. On Sunday in Baltimore, the Broncos are showing how far they still have to go. Denver's previously stout defense had no answers for anything, which is understandable when you're playing the Baltimore Ravens offense, as the Ravens just have a tendency to move the ball at will, and they did that for much of the afternoon against the Broncos. Nix did set a new franchise record for passing yards by a Broncos rookie, but he did so while his team was getting beat bad, so he certainly had a lot of garbage time to pad his stats, but still take nothing away from him and how he has performed in his first season. So now we move on to the division representatives this week. Like I said, we had a couple of lone representatives in the East, the Dolphins, and in the West, the Broncos, and in the South, between the Texans and the Colts, I went with the Colts. So of these 3 teams, who is going to represent the AFC this week? Well, it's kind of a toss-up at the moment too. I think we can roll out the Broncos, but then you think about the Dolphins and Colts, which are these 2 teams. Ultimately, I went with the Dolphins this week too. I just think that losing Tua kind of hurt him really bad. It put him on a losing streak, and even though he's back, it was, right, ultimately they had to win games to try to stay relevant. They haven't been winning games, and I just don't think, even if they stop the slide, they're not going to stop it in time to make themselves relevant. At least probably not contenders. And so from the AFC, we move to the NFC, and we start in the NFC East, which has a lone representative from the Lone Star State. I think we were here last week doing this with the Cowboys as well. And let's be honest, things continue to go from bad to worse for the Cowboys. It's bad enough that the Cowboys suffered its Dallas suffered its third straight loss Sunday in Atlanta, or that the injury-depleted defense had no answers again. Now the team's quarterback and best offensive weapon are injured. Dak Prescott is hobbled by a hamstring injury so severe that they put him on IR, meaning he is out the next 4 weeks, and that will probably do it for their season right there. Also, CeeDee Lamb is banged up, but there's no talk about him missing any time. And I'll give him credit for trying to get it on that one. He had no reason to go out there and play, but he did. He gave it a go. And then also the defense. The defense has struggled all season. Sunday was not an outlier. They've struggled all season, especially against the run. So the offense is one-dimensional, and the defense has been flat out bad often. So there is Texas-sized trouble brewing in Big D, and it only got worse with the news of Prescott being placed on IR. Now we go to the NFC North, which has the Bears and the Packers this week. And for the Bears, from a talent standpoint, this team should probably be in the playoff hunt. Chicago's defense is well above average when it's at its best, and the offense is loaded with playmaking skill players. But Caleb Williams is a rookie quarterback, still, got to remember that. And Matt Eberflus, well, he looks to be in over his head as a head coach. Make no mistake about it, Caleb Williams has a bright future in the NFL. Eberflus, as it looks right now, has less of a future in Chicago. He didn't have his team prepared to defend a simple Hail Mary a week ago. And his team looked totally unprepared to face the Cardinals on Sunday. Think about that rushing touchdown to close out the first half. Shouldn't have happened. Eberflus continues to do dumb things like leaving Caleb Williams in a game that is already decided. He did sprain his ankle, thankfully nothing too serious, but obviously that's kind of why you might want to consider protecting a quarterback from himself, no matter how much they want to go out there and compete. And I guess this is an ugly stat record for Eberflus here. He is 3-18 in road games. Not a good look at all. And for the Packers, one of the most exciting aspects of the Packers roster is how young it is. But that's also a bit of a concern. They do have some significant up-and-coming performers, particularly on offense, but mistakes made against a team like the Lions show that Green Bay isn't quite ready to achieve that elite status just yet. As this group grows together, head coach Matt LaFleur will have them ready with things cleaned up. Right now, the Packers are a level or two below the competition that they faced on Sunday. And then we go to the NFC South, which has the Saints and the Buccaneers this week. And things in the Big Easy have grown quite difficult. With the Saints traveling home after an embarrassing loss to the Panthers, New Orleans decided to make a big move. Well, they made two big moves, but when I wrote the script, they only made one. The first big move was firing head coach Dennis Allen, and the second big move was trading Marshawn Lattimore, their number one cornerback. Derek Carr continues to be a question mark at the quarterback position, and also not very well liked after the hospital ball he threw to Chris Olave, and also his performance in general. Carr returned to the lineup on Sunday after dealing with an oblique injury and did little to provide a boost to this Saints offense. The Saints are staring down the possibility of significant changes continuing in the coming months if something drastic doesn't occur. Of course, the salary cap is always an issue too, so you wonder how that's going to play out and what roster moves they're going to have to make as a result of that salary cap. And for the Buccaneers, well, give them credit. They battled. The offense battled all the way to the end. The defense, they tried, but I understand those boys being gassed because, man, it can be exhausting playing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. But they gave them all they could handle and took the game to overtime. Baker Mayfield continues to make the best out of a terrible situation, utilizing his pass-catching corpse. Continues to make the best of a pass-catching corpse that was short of its top three players in Week 9. But in the end, the Buccaneers came up short. Again, Tampa Bay has now lost 4 of 5 after a hot start, and the Buccaneers have fallen well off the pace in the NFC South. Tampa Bay now has to face the other Super Bowl team from last season in the 49ers, and if they lose that game and hit their bye at 4-6, it might not matter, or I should say the return of Mike Evans might not matter. And last, we go to the NFC West, which has a lone representative in the Seattle Seahawks. And earlier this season, the Seahawks were a 3-0 team that looked like a real factor in the NFC West. 4 losses in 5 games later. Well, the Seahawks look like a flawed team that will have to scramble to make the postseason at all. Geno Smith had a miserable game Sunday. The question is whether the Seahawks can get back to being that team, or if this is who they truly are, a mediocre team. Offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb must do a better job incorporating running backs Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet in for better offensive balance, especially when DK Metcalf is not playing. Hopefully they get him back, but when he's not playing and when Jackson Smith and Jigba is not making plays, I mean, he stepped up in that game, but I think that was just game script dependent how they were using him in that game, but definitely got to use the running game more, as I said, when DK Metcalf is not playing. So with that, we go into the division representatives for this week, and as you can see, it's a fatal 4-way again. I always love seeing these. We have the Cowboys in the East, the Bears in the North, the Saints in the South, and the Seahawks in the West. Of these 4 teams, which is representing the NFC, you can probably guess it's the team that fired its head coach. It's the New Orleans Saints. I told myself, I said, you know what, I'm going to have to lean heavily towards the Saints if they lose to the Panthers. Well, I guess we'll see if I actually did lean heavily towards the Saints. So a Super Bowl matchup this week. In the AFC, we have the Miami Dolphins, and in the NFC, we have the New Orleans Saints. Dolphins, Saints, Super Bowl. Doesn't that sound exciting? Well, before we get to this week's team, we must do the recap through 8 weeks. We have the Panthers, who got a win over the Saints, and while it's not going to matter, and you know what? It will matter for the short term. It's a feel-good moment. Bryce Young got to do a victory formation thing, so good for him. But ultimately, it doesn't really change much for the season. Giants losing to the Commanders. Daniel Jones did play decent in that game. He threw some touchdown passes. That's always a good thing. The Titans got a win over the Patriots in overtime. But that doesn't really change much about the team other than make them feel good for that week. The Jaguars... Jaguars lost after trying to make a comeback. They were down 22-0 and then almost made a comeback. The Patriots, well, Drake May battled as best as he could, but there's only so much he can do on his own. The Browns, listless performance against the Chargers there. Jameis Winston had 3 interceptions. The Raiders, they got beat so bad by the Bengals that they benched Gardner Minshew again and then fired their offensive coordinator. And the Jets, they got a win over the Texans, and that's great. But not enough for me to believe that this team is truly turning things around, is going to make a postseason run. I guess I'll just watch and see how things play out for them. And with that, now we get to this week's team. Between the Dolphins and the Saints, who is this week's team? I went with the New Orleans Saints. Yeah, I think it's rather obvious the team that fired its head coach and traded its number 1 cornerback is the team pretty much admitting that, hey, this season is pretty much over. And when you have players apologizing for losing a football game, things truly are rough for the Saints. I mean, really, I just kind of knew if they lost to the Panthers, that was going to be it. That was going to be it for Dennis Allen and his tenure. And as for Derek Carr, I don't quite feel like they move on from him just yet, but I think certainly the Saints are going to be looking at their options at quarterback in the offseason. And with that, that will do it for this week's episode of Throwing in the Towel. I'm Dougie Doug. Thank you so much for watching.